afternoon. Here we are again, right? 2 years from the date where we were at the Fuller Craft Museum celebrating our multicultural event and encouraging people not to shake hands, which seemed so foreign. And here we are 2 years later on the eve of being able to be mask-free again in March of 2022. But I have to say, can I ask everyone for a round of applause for all of us for coming out today and getting back together in person. Good afternoon, I'm Chris Cooney, and I'm the president of the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to welcome you live and in person. There's no Zoom, Zoom today, no Doom, no Zoom, to another edition of Good Day Metro South. This used to be called Good Morning Metro South, and we did it early morning, but with this day and age, we're moving to the lunch because we're all kind of a little rusty, just getting back to schedules and getting people back to some type of normal. So I want to thank you for bearing with us with the masks and understanding that this is a transitional. It makes most people feel comfortable as we approach March. It's so nice to be here at Thorny Lee Golf Club. I want to thank Rich Campbell, General Manager of Thorny Lee, and Sharon Guthrie for their support of today's program. So a round of applause for all the staff here at Thorny Lee. As many of you know, the Chamber holds these programs regularly. It is a terrific opportunity to come together, reconnect with others, and to learn from interesting leaders in a variety of fields. Today, we are very pleased to be hosting the Mayor of Brockton, Bob Sullivan, as well as Dr. Michael Goodman from the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth, formerly of the University of Massachusetts Donahue Institute, which is their economic development arm. We will hear from each of them a little bit later. I would now like to acknowledge several tables of our friends from community-based organizations who have joined us here today. Please join me, and folks, give a wave as I mention your table. Please join me in a round of applause for Good Samaritan Medical Center, OCES, OCPC, Mary Waldron and her crew is back here at the table, the Cape Verdean Association, the NAACP, and the Brockton Rotary Club. Thank you. These organizations each stepped up in their own way during this pandemic and really helped people that otherwise wouldn't have been helped. Oftentimes they did it without any recognition and at their own expense of time and effort and exposure, potentially. And so we just want to thank them, and we're happy that they're here today, coming back together and being part of this event. We have a full program, so please enjoy your lunch while we continue. There's drinks in the back, there's coffee and tea, and there's some water and soda, and if you want seconds, go ahead. We understand, because we're going to be making best use of your time while you're eating, and we're going to be talking, and you're going to learn something and get some nourishment at the same time. So at this time, I would like to remind you that there are green question and answer sheets on each of your tables. There's a pencil there, and I think each of you were given a pen by our sponsor, OCES. If you have some questions for either the mayor or Dr. Goodman, please jot them down, just wave it in the air, and an ambassador or a chamber staff person will grab it from you and we'll get it into the queue. And we'll ask as many as we have time for, okay? It is now my pleasure to introduce our MC. Someone also deserves a very large round of applause. Somebody who started a healthcare organization here in the city with basically a Winnebago in a church parking lot, and now employs 650 people in very large buildings downtown Brockton, largest employer in downtown Brockton. Please welcome Sue Joss, the CEO and president of Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. Sue.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here, and I echo Chris's feeling of, doesn't it feel a little bit like the Twilight Zone or coming out of hibernation? I haven't been to an in-person event in a very long time. I know the mayor has, but this is kind of new to me, so it's a pleasure to be here. Let me start by welcoming and thanking our chamber ambassadors in attendance today. Richard Hook from SCU Credit Union, Brenda Cairns from OCES, and Catherine Light from Envision Bank. Thank you. So I'd also like to thank our chamber board members in attendance today. I see Dan Evans from Evans Machine. And I'm not sure I see Masa Kambabi from Kambabi Immigration Law, but if she's here, welcome. Finally, I'd like to thank our elected, selected, and state officials for their attendance today. Gregory Enos, Town of Avon, Connor Reed, Town of Easton. Dottie Fulganitti, Town of Easton Select Board Chair. David Gagney, Town of West Bridgewater. Frank Lynham, Town of Whitman. Margaret LaForest from the Mass Office of Business Development. Brockton School Committee, Kathleen Ehlers. City Councilor and former Mayor Moses Rodriguez. Mayor of Brockton, Robert Sullivan. State Senator who just arrived, Mike Brady. And we also have a candidate for the State Senate, Catherine Hufflermond of Randolph. So thank you all for coming. Today's Good Morning Metro South is being sponsored by OCES, Old Colony Elder Services. The mission of Old Colony Elder Services is to support the independence and dignity of older adults and individuals with disabilities by providing essential information and services that promote healthy and safe living. OCES proudly serves Greater Plymouth County and surrounding communities. It is a private, nonprofit organization headquartered in Brockton and designated as one of 25 aging service access points in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. OCES is governed by a board of directors, which includes representatives from the 23 communities in their ASAP service area. Since 1974, OCES has been the largest provider of in-home and community-based services for older adults and people living with disabilities in this part of Massachusetts. So now I'm happy to introduce and invite up to say a few words our sponsor, Armindo Rocha. Armindo is a volunteer program manager at OCES. He has been with the agency for 10 years. He manages OCES's volunteer and healthy living programs and ensures comprehensive service delivery with business partners and volunteers. For 5 years prior to his promotion, Rocha was OCS Intake and Referral Supervisor. Prior to that, he served as Home Care Program Supervisor. Before joining OCES, Armindo was a residential counselor for BAMSI. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Psychology from Bridgewater State University and a Master of Public Administration from Roger Williams University. A dedicated volunteer, Armindo is current president of the Association of Social Solidarity, a nonprofit organization aimed to change and shape the lives of Cape Verdean families in the Brockton community. Please welcome Armindo Rocha. Right, and I've got to
There's 3 or 4 questions.
join me here. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about OCES and what it does?
Thank you. As you mentioned earlier, OCES provides service to elders in the community. We are the largest home care based services in the Commonwealth and southern Massachusetts. Our main goal is to provide service to elders and individuals with a disability and maintain them in the community.
Great, thanks. And why is it important for small businesses and organizations to invest in volunteerism, and how can OCES help with this?
All right, I can. Is it okay if I take it out?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I can mention 4 reasons why offering volunteering within your company to employees is good for business. First, volunteering increases employee engagement. It builds a healthier workforce through volunteering programs. It helps your employees grow professionally and improve your brand image. As of April 2021, the estimated national value of each volunteer hour is currently $28.24. Why is this relevant? This is relevant because understanding the value of volunteers to nonprofit organizations is important because it helps leaders and organizations make a case for volunteers, volunteer programs, appropriate budget, and understand the financial value of what is often perceived as free labor. Volunteer helps their community. They serve they help their neighbors, they serve their communities, and provide their expertise. So no matter what kind of volunteer work they do, they are contributing in invaluable ways. In order to accomplish this sense of belonging in the community, Old Colony Elder Service, through the Retired Service Volunteer Program of Plymouth County, have the responsibility to partner with organizations in the local community to recruit and place volunteers to embrace the capacity of organizations and institutions within the community, to work towards common goals in the community, to work to integrate seniors into the activities and other service programs within the community, and to build a public awareness of a support program within the community.
Thanks, that's a lot of information. And can you talk about some of the volunteer opportunities at OCES?
Well, we operate under the umbrella of AmeriCorps, and our goal at OCES is to build relationships with the community we serve through service partnerships. OCES is in the business of community engagement. Why? Because helping people help others is what we do. We connect, we empower, and transform the community through purposeful volunteerism. And as of right now, opportunities that we have, Meals on Wheels is one of the biggest opportunities. We collaborate with senior centers and council agents to provide meals to consumer doorsteps every single day. We also have the Meals Money Management Program. It's one of the programs that we have that's bill spares tasks that we collaborate with volunteers to help individuals in their home paying their bills. At the same time, avoid potential financial fraud. Right now, we have at least 26, 28 service partners, including Red Cross, Senior Centers, Council Agents, Housing Solutions of Southeastern Massachusetts, the Aspire Center, Brockton VNA, Health Imperatives, etc. And currently, we seek in partnership with Brockton Neighborhood Health Center and Cape Verde Association and various agencies, medical business, and for group opportunities. We have this program called Operation Gratitude, in which we invite organizations to do letter writing to troops overseas.
Wow, that all sounds great. I understand OCES promotes diversity and inclusion in the workforce and embraces diversity within the volunteer opportunities it offers. How is this valuable to businesses and organizations that are interested in volunteering?
Of course, inclusion is essential. OCS has a diverse workforce that allows us to pull from our broader range of perspectives, opinions, and experiences. We can translate this same valuable concept into benefits to our service partners by offering a diverse volunteer workforce, such as bilingual volunteers, when a company might not have a budget to cover such expense.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all the great work you're doing and for the work of your organization. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now I'm pleased to welcome the mayor of the city of Brockton, Mayor Robert F. Sullivan. I think of Mayor Sullivan as our cheerleader and chief in the healthcare community over the past 2 years because he gathers all of us together every week to talk about and coordinate the COVID pandemic and do the best we can to care for our community. And many times it's his value, biggest value to us is just simply asking how we are. Because we've been through so much as he has and as so many of you has. And, he's always asking how the morale is of our staff and what we need and how we can help. And we really appreciate that. Mayor Sullivan was raised in Brockton, a product of the Brockton schools, and excited to hear what he has to say today. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, first of all, it's great to see everybody, and I want to thank everybody for being here. You all get party favors, all right? These are the official party favors. No, listen, my name's Bob Sullivan, and I am the mayor of the city of Champion, city of Brockton. And before I go into my speech, I want to first of all take a moment to thank Chris Cooney and his team in the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. So, Chris, could you please come up here? City of Champions Mayor's Office, official citation, be it known that the Mayor of Brockton hereby extends his appreciation to Metro South Chamber of Commerce in recognition of your continued professionalism, dedication, and commitment to the advancement and growth of businesses within the City of Brockton and beyond. It gives me great pleasure, Chris, as CEO, to present this citation to you as a symbol of our collective appreciation. It's duly signed by myself, Robert F. Sullivan, Mayor of the City of Brockton, this 18th day of February, 2022.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That was not in the script, so thanks for the surprise.
So I want to just take a moment to thank several people that are here today that are teammates of mine. They're not employees, they're not staff members, they're teammates. We're a team. We're either going to win or lose, and we're not going to lose. We're the City of Champions. So my Chief of Staff, Sydney Merrill, I want to thank her for her leadership. I want to thank Troy Clarkson, the CFO for the City of Brockton. I want to thank the newest member, Yolanda Kiner, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the City of Brockton. Thank you, Yolanda. Rob May, our city planner and economic developer, is here as well. I want to thank him. And my communications liaison, Davison Perez. Thank you very much, Davison. So I actually love what the Chamber does. I love that we can come together today. You know, Chris and his team, we did the SBA call, you know, every Friday, and it was invaluable. It really was. But I do have to thank Sue Joss and her team at Neighborhood Health Center, because when COVID came and reared its ugly head here at the City of Brockton, we knew it was coming. You know, we knew when it was overseas, specifically when it was in Italy. I called a meeting at City Hall saying this is coming to the United States and it's going to hit Brockton. We know it. And Sue was the first person to say, "What do you need, Mayor?" And it continues to this very, very moment. So thank you, Sue. Thank you very much. So I told my kids I was coming here, and my daughter Grace said, "Why do they want to hear from you, Dad?" So I will remember this story, because at the end I'll conclude with a Grace story. But good afternoon, everyone. I am just so grateful to be the guest speaker. I'm really excited to hear from Dr. Goodman. Mike, even though he's a BU Terrier and I'm a BC Eagle, we can respectfully disagree on the bean pot and the like, but nobody is perfect. I know. I mean, you didn't get into BC, so you had to go to BU. I don't know what to tell you. But listen, I'm just excited as all of you to hear what the doctor has to say. He's an expert in his field, and we can all learn from him today. So thank you for being here, Doctor. You know, as we turn the page on 2021, and we really look forward to where we are right now with 2022, there's just so many things to be excited about in Brockton and the region. And again, Metro South doesn't just serve Brockton, even though it's physically located in the city. It serves the region. And what's good for the City of Brockton is good for Randolph and Abington and Avon. So I want to thank all the elected officials that are here today, but also the town administrators, the town managers. We do a regional call once a month to say, hey, Connor, what's working well in Easton? Or Dave, what's working well in West Bridgewater? So it's the synergy of working together, and that's what it's about to be a successful business. Brockton's a business. We're a $500 million business known as the City of Brockton. And what I've said as being the mayor, I guess I'm the CEO, is we're in the people's business. And we need to always remember that. So, you know, from the first day that I entered office, January 6th of 2020, it really has been my goal to facilitate proper business in the City of Brockton. Now, a lot of you have been following what's going on in Brockton, and some of you maybe not, because the focus and really the eyes on the prize has been health and safety for your loved ones and your family and your employees. But let me just share a few things. Chris said I had 25 minutes. I promise you, you won't have to hear my Irish brogue for 25 minutes. But to that end, here in the city, we did launch the Brockton Open for Business initiative. It's something that I thought was extremely important. And it's been extremely successful, and that was launched in May of 2021 with an effort geared towards making it easy for businesses that are here currently and those that want to come to Brockton and the region. And so what we're doing is we're making it easier in policy and regulatory adjustments, the introduction of high-tech new technology and best practices that truly will facilitate the process within City Hall and working with the city departments. And as a guy that was a councilor at large for 14 years and 5 years as the council president, I heard it all the time. And I know Moses has heard it, and I know Mike, when he was the ward councilor here, had heard it as well. So we need to come together as one to come up with a practice that's beneficial to all. Businesses that are here, need our support. And more importantly, we need to attract the new ones. So it's a win-win, right? That's what it is. Listen, I'm a business guy myself. I have an MBA. So I have to understand that the principles of business, and Dan Evans is a great example. The businesses or principles of business, a successful business, is to make sure that you can produce. If the customer wants something, you need to produce that in a timely, professional manner. And so the same thing, when someone comes to City Hall, they go to zoning or ZBA or Board of Health, they need to make sure that they don't have to keep running around. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's counterproductive. So I just want to let you know that hiring new staff members and the primary focus of these folks will be to help businesses navigate, strictly navigate the process, what available resources there are at City Hall. And I know that Margaret LaForest is running a little late and Susan Whitaker, but Eli and Susan and Margaret have been awesome. And I want to thank you, Chris, for bringing them to the table because they have made a difference for businesses here. Many of you remember when Sorelli Foods was on West Chestnut Street, and it was really an icon in the city of Brockton. And they ended up leaving Brockton over about $100,000 difference. They needed resources and help, about $100,000. And it was short-sighted, and they left, and they went to Middleborough, and then ultimately they ended up folding. That can never happen again. It was a learning lesson. It was a sad lesson. It can never happen again, and it won't as long as I'm mayor of the city of Brockton. So the Open for Business initiative, truly, it's been in essence successful for the last 9 months. We're going to continue to doing that, but we can only continue, and the success can only be achieved by all of us working together. And one thing that Sue and the CEO, Matt Hesketh at Good Sam and VA, and Bob Haffey, who's the new CEO, used to be Kim Holland at Brockton Hospital. First thing I said when everybody came to the table was, I don't care about competition. We put that aside. We need to focus on working together in collaboration. And that's the way that I've always governed as a mayor and as a city councilor. And that's what we need to continue to do. Working with the state delegation and working with the city council and working with the school committee. I know Kathy Ehlers is here, newest school committee member from Ward 1 as well. But ultimately, it's to be an effective leader, you have to be a good listener. You have to be a good listener. So I want to take a moment to thank a few folks. The BRA, the Brockton Redevelopment Authority, led by Robert Jenkins, has truly been just a catalyst for change. If anybody participated the other night in the BRA update, it was a state of downtown. And it was extremely important and successful, and we need to continue to do that. They're not one-offs. We need to continue on a regular basis. But one thing that I can say that the BRA, which is, again, the Redevelopment Authority, they hired someone. It's a game-changing hire. Adelsa Mendez. If you don't know Adelsa, you're missing out. You need to meet her. She is someone that hit the ground running on day one. She's from Cape Verde. She's a lawyer by training. She has the skill set and professional acumen to achieve great things. So we've done a lot of these meeting of the mind sessions. So it's connecting businesses to resource. And I'm going to keep saying that, connecting businesses to resources. So again, I want to thank you, Robert, and your team at the BRA. We need to continue to do that. Another really great partnership is with Old Colony Planning Council. Mary Waldron leads OCPC, and yeah, let's give Mary a round of applause. And Dottie Fulgenetti, who again is a selectman over in the neighboring town of Easton, they came to us and they said, Mayor, some other municipalities are coming up, which are launching an app. And is Brockton interested? And I said, absolutely. So the Brockton Mass City of Champions app is up and running. And Davison, again, has been the point at my office. But if you're not aware of it, please take advantage of it. It's free PR. It's free PR. It's a process that allows everybody to have a repository to share information about the mom and pop businesses in Brockton, or the large international businesses like a Concord Foods or a Cindy's Kitchen or WB Mason. So again, we're all in this together, and I know it's working in other municipalities. I know it's working in Avon, it's working in Easton. We need to continue to do that. So again, if you could please look in it, if you're a Brockton business, it's Brockton MA City of Champions app, and it does connect really the business community with the residents and the visitors. And by listing restaurants and shopping and personal care services, that's really going to create the beneficial relationship that we need here in the city and beyond. So again, I strongly urge you to please download the app. I'm not a techie, but if I can do it, you all can do it as well. So it's free. Underline, highlight, red line. The lawyer in me says, red line, it is free of charge. So please take advantage of that. So we are making a concerted effort here in Brockton to be tech savvy, internet speed and businesses, and how we're going to be able to launch a broadband infrastructure. Broadband infrastructure is really the key of every business in this room. And it was definitely key during COVID, right? Nobody knew a Zoom. Unless you're an old guy like me, Channel 2 when we were kids, Zoom. It was the only Zoom I ever heard of when I was a kid, right? Who remembers Zoom? Raise your hand. Yeah, we're old, believe me. But listen, we need to continue to look at affordable internet. And what we're doing right now in Brockton, it's a citywide fiber optic network analysis we're doing. It's called connectbrockton.com. Please go on that website. Again, connectbrockton.com. You can fill out a survey. We're doing our due diligence right now. We're doing a really deep dive on, can we here in the city of Brockton have our own internet system, or do we need to continue to rely on Comcast and Xfinity? And maybe there's a happy medium where we could do that. I will tell you, I did meet with the powers that be of Verizon. They're not interested in rolling out Fios in the city of Brockton at this time. I had a call with them just the other day. So again, high-speed internet throughout the city, vis-a-vis our fiber optic network, I think is going to be a game changer, not just for the businesses, but for the residents. So we are continuing to search for innovative services and solutions to really focus on growth here in Brockton. So many of you have been able to drive around the City Champions and see construction. Right? Construction is alive. You've never seen more cranes in your life in the city of Brockton than right now. And that's just not me and my effort. It's a team effort. It's a team effort. But I will tell you this, that as a lifelong Brocktonian, I'm really proud of what's going on right now in the city of Brockton. People understand Brockton is on the radar, not just for local developers or developers in the Commonwealth, but I'm talking about national developers. I had someone from San Francisco come and meet with us the other day, a guy from Orlando, Florida, a billionaire. He came, I've never met a billionaire before. A guy comes into he shook his hand just like anybody else, right? But he said to me, and he owns an NHL team, you know what he said to me? Brockton, Massachusetts has a Chick-fil-A and 2 Starbucks? I didn't know that. That's what he said to me. So I put on my walking shoes and we walked around. I showed him everything, because that's what it means, right? When you want to market Brockton, or you want to market Abington or Avon or Holbrook or Hanson, it's about getting out there and showing the people what it is, right? Not just what's on the news of a crime, but you don't hear about the good things. The 8 kids that graduated from Brockton High that went to Ivy last year, one that got into every Ivy that you could get into. These are the good things. We need to market the hell out of it, and we're going to do that as long as I'm mayor of the city of Brockton. So I do want to just say that working in collaboration with developers, and I can name a lot, Ted Carmen or Joseph Gonzalez or Mr. Keefe at Trinity, Joffrey Anatole, I can mention many of them. They're not giving up on Brockton. And none of you are giving up on Brockton because you wouldn't be here if you gave up on Brockton. So continue to keep your eyes on the prize. Continue to realize that what I'm leveraging right now is transit-oriented in Brockton. We can get into South Station in 35 minutes. We have 3 commuter stops in the city of Brockton. Nothing against other cities or towns, but I'm the mayor of the city of Brockton. Price point rent in Brockton right now trumps Quincy and Dorchester and Southie and Charlestown. Young professionals are moving to Brockton. Now, a lot of them are getting on the train in the morning, Campbell, Montello, or Maine, and they're going into Boston. I'll take that for right now. But in the future, I don't want them to jump on the train. I want them to work and play and live here in the city of Brockton. So the goal is to achieve that. But we're also not just looking at what the market rate is doing right now, but also the renaissance that's happening. It's great to have housing. You can have market rate and affordable housing. We have 750 housing units in the queue right now, and 139 of those are based on the HDIP program, and every tool in the toolbox we're using, right? Historic tax credits and the TIFs and the TIEs and all these acronyms. But ultimately, we need to have the resources in Brockton. So what's happening next month, and this is going to happen, and it's a game changer. First black-owned brewery in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Brockton Beer, is opening up next month. Now, I've thrown this out there. I'm going to say it again. If you're there, I'm buying the first round, but only one, okay? But when I talk about my years of service and serving with Senator Brady or Rep. Dubois or anybody that served in the city council, we needed to be creative because Brockton was, quite honestly, had been knocked down, right? And it was on the canvas. And we are the city champions. And how are we going to dust ourselves off and fire off the left and the right? Well, you needed to be creative. So 40-hour smart growth zoning was something that, as a young lawyer and as someone that was on the planning board for 2 years when Mayor Eunice put me on, and when I was elected, I said, we have to be creative. And Mike, and at that time, Tim Cruz, who's now the city clerk, and Paul Stadinsky, and everybody that was serving said, what does that mean, Bob? And I said, well, listen, just have a leap of faith with me. 40-hour smart growth zoning, it's a mechanism, but it is a catalyst for development. And if we adopt it, I'm telling you, the old saying, if you build it, they will come, field the dreams, well, it happened. It happened. Downtown Brockton had a $30 million investment with Trinity Financial. They're doing phase 2 right now. Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito will be here just in a short order. So if you're looking at where the pub used to be downtown across from W.B. Mason, that's awesome housing. But you know what's also awesome? You can go there right now and see a Renoir and a Picasso or a Whistler, because the Milton Museum was closing up. They were going to auction off all this high fine art. But you know what? They didn't, because they relocated to Brockton. So you don't need to jump on the train to go into the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. You can walk right downtown Brockton and see it, you know? And so those are the good things, And we could talk about the history of Brockton. And it is Black History Month, February, right? But it should be 365 days. It shouldn't be 1 month. But one thing I can tell you, though, is that the history of Brockton is real. We can talk about the first, right? The first department store Santa Claus, Mr. Edgar. Thomas Edison was here. First electrified fire station, first electrified movie theater, first electrified street light in the city of Brockton. But we also had a little tree called the Liberty Tree, where Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison would come and preach. The Underground Railroad was here with stops on the railroad. And we are right now changing that whole block. And I want to thank Rob Corley and NeighborWorks Housing Solutions, because in that area, which used to be known as High Street, which is now Frederick Douglass, you are seeing where Brockton Beer is going, right? You're already seeing, if you're driving down at nighttime, you're seeing lights in the apartments. People are already there. But the Grayson Hotel, which is right behind it, is being revitalized and rebuilt. And one thing, it's a little story that I want to share. I went in there to take a final walk the other day, because I could never figure out, when the tree got cut down, where the hell did it go? Well, we found it in the basement of the Hotel Grayson. And so it was going to get thrown out. This just happened a few weeks ago. So we had pieces of Liberty Tree severed. I delivered one to Brockton High today. I delivered one yesterday to New Heights Charter. I delivered one to Cardinal Spelman. We have to learn from the history. Never forget the history to forge ahead for the future, right? And the same thing with businesses. We have to remember the business. Willie Stadelman, 100 years in the city of Champion, Stadelman Electric. We have to always value the dedication of all of you in this room, right? And listen and learn and leverage and continue. And listen, criticism's fine as well. You strengthen yourself through criticism. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's being able to come together like this, and now that COVID's not quite over, but almost over, making sure that all the banking institutions here have a voice. I see Lisa in the back, and there's just so much of talent in this room. And the common purpose right now is to have a better community. And so I will tell you this. When you're driving downtown Belmont Street and you get to Main Street and you're looking at the old former Ganley building, I want to thank Mike Brady and our new great ambassador to Ireland, who was the leader, Claire Cronin, and Jerry Cassidy and Michelle Dubois, because without the efforts of the state, that building wouldn't be there. And you know what's, yeah, that's true. But I also want to tell you this, it's not just going to be a state building, right, for the unemployment office for the Commonwealth, but Massasoit has a presence there. And I want to thank the new president, Ray DePasquale of Massasoit. He's an awesome, awesome individual, awesome guy. And when I talk about Brockton, and I do this quite a bit, I do walking tours with all these developers, but I also do it with folks that have a vested interest in development. Secretary Mike Keneally and Undersecretary Ashley Stolber, Dan Rivera, who used to be mayor, he's the CEO. He's a great person, but also forging that relationship with Lieutenant Governor Polito and Governor Baker. And I want to thank Charlie and Karen. They came here many times to give us grants. And the state grants that we're getting right now are really the basis for success. But they don't just, it's not short-sighted. They don't just come to give us grants. They also come because they like Brockton. When we did Marvelous Marvin Hagler Day, the governor came because he's a boxing fan and he wanted to be enriched with Brockton community and history. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I am going to tell you this, though. If you don't invest in Brockton, you're going to be kicking yourself, because the return on investment is real. The upside is real. I've said it before. Chris has heard me say it. If it was a stock, everybody should be buying. And I mean that, because Brockton is ripe for success. But it's only ripe for success because of the people and the talent. We might not be wealthy in terms of looking at a ledger. We're not, but we're wealthy with people. The number one asset of the city of Brockton, the people that live in Brockton. And you know what's beautiful about Brockton? The diversity of Brockton. When you walk around Brockton, you're going to meet people from all aspects of the world. And that's what I envision as a mayor and as a dad of 3 kids. The next generation is what we need to do right now. So I want to just say, before I conclude, why I think Brockton is ripe. It's the little things that make a difference, right? The old broken windows theory. But it's also the big things that make a difference. $98 million bond authorization that the city council approved. So now we're going to have a public safety building on Warren Ave. Doing our legal mechanisms of friendly takings, where we now acquired 3 buildings on Highland Street. So from Highland Street to West Elm Street, we're going to have a public safety building. It's not a fire station. It's not a police station. It's 4 departments. Informational technology is going to leave Brockton High School to come to this new state-of-the-art. So it frees up classroom spaces for our boys and girls and our teachers at Brockton High. That's a game changer. BEMA, Brockton Emergency Management, you've heard about the acronym. They've saved lives working with Board of Health. They're relocating from the War Memorial to this new building. And police and fire. The fire station on Pleasant Street was wired by Thomas Edison. It was for horse-drawn carriages. So I am telling you right now that I'm going to continue to work with you and for you. I'm also going to promote each and every one of you. If you don't know Shalala Gilmer, Black-owned Brockton, you're missing out. Please, please meet this individual. This weekend, today, tomorrow, and Sunday, up at the Westgate, it's Black-owned Brockton. And we need to continue to express the success. Fusion Dolls was on the national news the other night. Fusion Dolls is outside here as well. So I'm going to let Dr. Goodman speak, but I want to tell you this. When we think about the next generation of Brockton, and we think about the development, and we think about the investment, and I am investing millions and millions and millions of dollars from ARPA funds, the federal money, into Brockton. And I'm not just investing money willy-nilly. That's not how I roll, if you know me. It's fiscal responsibility and cost containment measures. But right now, it's a game changer. It's historic. It's a lifetime. We'll never see this again. Thankfully, I hope in my lifetime we never see another COVID pandemic. I think it's every 100 years, so I won't be. I'll be at Calvary Cemetery. I'll still be in Brockton, but I won't be staying at Thorny Lee. But I want to. I just want to say this. We are better together. We need to continue to have the frank conversations about what is right and what is wrong, what is right in business, what is right in housing, what is right in education, what is right in police reform. But we also need to remember this, that if we don't create the recipe for success or the building block for success right now in the year 2022, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to be going in the wrong direction. And so I just want to say to each and every one of you, thank you for what you do every day. God bless you and your families. We are truly the city of champions because of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Wow, that was great, Mayor. I'm glad you're not in Calvary Cemetery yet. So, Dr. Goodman beat that. Yeah. So just a reminder, you have green papers on your tables. Please fill them out with questions for either the mayor or Dr. Goodman. Dr. Michael Goodman is Senior Advisor to the Chancellor for Economic Development and Strategic Initiatives and Professor of Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. In August of 2020, he was appointed Acting Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs by UMass System President Marty Meehan, and served 18 months in that role. This followed 6 years of service as Executive Director of the Public Policy Center, 2 terms as Faculty Senate President, and 6 years as Chair of the Department of Public Policy. Professor Goodman joined the faculty of UMass Dartmouth in 2009 after serving for 8 years as the Director of Economic and Policy Research at the UMass Donahue Institute. He's a leading analyst of the Massachusetts economy and has authored or co-authored over 50 professional publications on a wide range of public policy issues, including regional economic development and housing policy, as well as demographic and other applied social science research topics. He has supported this research by generating over $6 million in external grant and contract funding from a diverse array of public and private sources. As an economic sociologist, Professor Goodman is a 3-time past president of the New England Economic Partnership, a nonprofit organization made up of leading regional analysts that produces semi-annual economic forecasts of the economic outlook for each of the 6 New England states. He currently serves as co-editor of Mass Benchmarks, the Journal of the Massachusetts Economy, published by the Mass UMass Donahue Institute in cooperation with the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Dr. Goodman earned his MA and PhD at Boston University, which he's...
Again, no one's perfect.
Yeah. Please help me welcome Dr. Michael Goodman.
Thank you, Sue. I don't know if I can live up to Mayor Sullivan's remarks, but I will do my best. Always a pleasure to be back in the City of Champions with the Metro South Chamber. Thanks for all that you do, and especially humbling to be introduced by a leading member of your healthcare community, which, as we all know, has been through about as difficult a time as any of us can imagine in our lifetimes, and hopefully we won't see any time like that anytime soon, now that it looks like we're starting at least to come out of this. So to all the good work that you and your colleagues are doing, Sue, to, I know, the folks at local government, both here in Brockton and across the region, and of course the wonderful community-based organizations that are represented here today, thank you for all that you've been doing. We've been keeping busy at the public university as well, and so what I'm going to do this afternoon is to try to briefly offer my perspective on the state of the state economy, where things stand in early 2022, where it appears that things are headed from the perspective of someone who's been paying attention to these things for quite some time. I myself am a New Bedford resident and a proud Gateway City homeowner, and so I just want you to know, since now I have a couple of different roles at the university, that all the things I'm going to say today are choices that I'm making, my interpretation of the available evidence, and so no fair blaming my boss. I'm going to start by highlighting a few issues that I think are particularly salient to understanding where we are today, and I think to the mayor's, one of his later points, the human capital, the assets, the people of this region, of this state, I think are really going to be critical to us taking full advantage of all of the opportunities that I think are out there and overcoming some of the challenges. And boy, have there been some challenges. So I moved into the role of acting provost in August of 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. But as you can see here, if you look at the quarterly rates of growth of the state economy, this is sort of the annual rate of growth for each of the quarters. We had as large a downturn both nationally and here in the Commonwealth in the second quarter of 2020 as we have ever seen in the recorded history of the United States, including the Great Depression period. We declined, actually contracted at almost over a 30% rate, both at the state level and nationally in the second quarter, and snapped back at a similarly historic rate in the third quarter. Now, even though the numbers in Q3 were larger, the numbers in Q2, these are growth rates, so we still haven't gotten back to where we started in terms of the actual overall economic activity, and for reasons of mathematics. But since then, you can see Massachusetts in blue and the U.S. in red. We've been growing at a fairly robust pace ever since, and finished the fourth quarter, the last 3 months of 2021, at a fairly sizable rate of growth. Again, a lot of this is coming back from what was an extremely difficult set of economic circumstances. I likened it to putting a patient, if you'll forgive the medical analogy, into a medically induced coma. This is not the kind of thing that a policymaker would ever want to do, or a doctor would ever want to do, unless the alternative was truly worse. And so we basically told our businesses, told our households, told our communities to essentially stop doing business in many sectors, to stay home, to not go to school, and to do these sorts of things. And many of us worked through that, and many of us were able to continue to work through that, but there are a number of our neighbors and businesses that weren't so fortunate and took it on the chin in order for the larger community to be able to minimize the terrible impact of this pandemic experience. As we look at the recovery in jobs, because when the economy slows, or as was the case in mid-2020, essentially stops growing and contracts severely, lots of people lose their jobs. And we experienced that here in Massachusetts, about a turn from the very beginning of 2020 to the worst of it in April of 2020. About 700,000 of us were displaced from our workplaces, and were fortunately sustained by state and federal aid. But unlike the last recession, the so-called Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, I look around the room, I can see a number of you were around, so you probably remember. And that was a very difficult period of time, and it took us a long time to get those jobs back. You can see that more V-shaped line that starts to taper off as we get towards the end of 2021, the very end of that light green line. We've been adding jobs very, very quickly, but are not quite back to zero, which is where we were in February 20. So even though the economy has been performing very well, even though I think a lot of us are busier than we have ever been, we are still not back to where we started, and I think that's quite striking. Figuring out why we're not expanding more quickly, I think, is something I want to spend a few minutes on, and I think it does have a lot to do with conditions in our labor market and changes in our population. Spoiler alert, I think these changes do position communities like Brockton and my hometown, New Bedford, relatively well coming out of this recession, which is not usually the case, as I'm sure most of you are highly familiar. The experience within the various sectors of the economy, the major employment industries in the state, has varied quite dramatically. Unsurprisingly, this is pretty intuitive. The sectors of the economy that rely most directly on face-to-face interaction and frontline work experience the most displacement. So organizations like this one, the Country Club, that relies in part on events, or hotels, or anyone who's depending on tourism or business or personal travel, was displaced because that activity essentially stopped. And so the meteoric drop in jobs in those sectors has not recovered nearly as fast as it has in others. Interestingly enough, and I'll comment a little more about this in a moment, even in areas where the demand never stopped, education and health services in particular, we saw a significant amount of displacement, in part because the pandemic conditions required a number of our hospitals and healthcare providers to stop delivering normal services and to redirect their attention to pandemic response. So I'm sure I'm not the only one who missed a physical, who missed an eye exam, who maybe hasn't been to the dentist in quite as long time as their dental provider would like them. That had a real and significant impact on those employment sectors. And the whole variety of others, I think, especially those sectors that can allow people to work remotely, that could continue to do business in a virtual environment. There were disruptions. I mean, I really miss face-to-face contact. It's nice to give one of these talks for the first time in a couple of years where I can actually make eye contact with individual members of the audience. It's the small things. But I was able to survive and continue to work remotely. And I have all sorts of complaints about it, but I did not experience the same kind of time that someone who works in a hospital or someone who works in a hotel or a restaurant did. And so those sectors, and again, I think this is no news to a Chamber of Commerce audience, suffered disproportionately. I think one of the things, though, that is masked by some of these data that I've showed so far is that a lot of the slowness or the relative slowness recently of the recovery has to do not with an inadequate number of jobs or an inadequate number of job opportunities, but rather an inadequate number of folks who are available to work. And I think a lot of that has to do with the changes in the economy and the continuing concerns about the pandemic, particularly in fields that don't pay particularly well and where there's still some lingering concerns about safety. This very broadly tells a little bit of a different story than the last couple of charts, which show this robust recovery in employment. This is the broadest definition of the unemployment rate, not the headline rate that we read, but the number of people or the share of the workforce that are unemployed, working part-time when they would prefer to work full-time, so involuntarily underemployed, or tell the federal survey takers that they would like a job, but they can't find one and they've given up looking. That stood at the end of December here in Massachusetts at just about 9.5%. So that's a very, very high rate of what a nerdy economist would call labor underutilization. And what you might say in plain English is people just holding back and not necessarily returning to the workplace. I think some of it has to do with some changes in arrangements at the household level and a changing attitude towards jobs in some of these fields. people being able to not have to rely on those jobs for an extended period of time, and the availability of jobs in other fields have made it a very competitive labor market for restaurateurs and hoteliers and folks who have historically relied on labor and have been able to get it on demand at their preferred price. That's really been a recipe for some challenges among those employers, and we are starting to see real evidence of upward movement in the wages at the lower end of the occupational spectrum. So raises being highest in those fields where the employees tend to earn the lowest. And I think that's a straightforward supply and demand thing. We've gotten very used to, in the United States and in Massachusetts, to employers setting the terms. Hey, I have a job. If you want it, you'll take it, to now I have to figure out a way to make this job appealing enough so that someone who has more choices than they used to selects this field and not that field. I think in the short term, that's been a recipe for challenges for businesses and has some negative effects on the economy, but over the long run, I think it's healthy, although we do need at some point to fill some of those jobs. The part of the larger story is that over the last several generations here in Massachusetts, the demographic trends have not allowed us to have a surplus of people as we normally would. So I could talk for hours, and I won't, about how the demographic composition of the population can change. But in a nutshell, it's very straightforward. People are born, people die, people move in, people move out, right? And we can count some of those things very precisely. We know how many people are born, we know how many people die. Here in Massachusetts, we're a very highly educated state, but that means we tend to start our families later and we tend to have smaller families. Now, that's not everywhere. Certain communities, including this one, have had more robust birth rates and have been a magnet for international immigration, which has allowed the state and communities like Brockton to grow. But if you look overall in Massachusetts, we actually last year had more deaths than births. And that is really more about two things, right? An older population, fewer young people coming in, more old people making up a higher share of the total, and a restriction on immigration as well, which has put some downward pressure on our families. And so the old-fashioned way of growing the population, which have more babies, and a couple of decades from now they'll be available to work, hasn't really been working out for us for a long time. You could argue all the way back to the founding of the state, when we acquired the state through various means from our Native American neighbors, and my apologies, I wasn't there, but my apologies. I think we take for granted often that portion of the history of our Commonwealth and our region. But we've relied on people coming here from other parts of the world. That's the international migration line. So the old-fashioned way, natural increase, surplus of births over deaths, negative. Domestic migration, that is the number of people coming to Massachusetts from other states within the U.S. as compared to those of us who are moving out, also consistently negative, except for around the worst of the Great Recession when we were doing better and others were doing worse, and so fewer people left. But we've relied on that international immigration. That's positive. That's north of the zero. That's people who are living in other countries who choose to relocate to the Commonwealth. That's been dipping down. I don't know, you may recall some changes in federal immigration policy around 2016, right? So that clearly has had a negative effect. So a lot of this is about fewer people entering the workforce, and therefore, when you consider all of the sudden demand for labor in this environment, finding the people you want at the price you want as an employer has proven to be very difficult. Of course, it's not just people coming into the labor market when they finish school or come of age. It's people deciding who are older whether they want to stay in the labor market, whether they're going to retire or whether they're going to try to stick it out for a few years. Here you can see on the left the share of adults over 55 who are retired after the Great Recession in the late aughts, 2008, 2009. The share of the population that was retired actually went down. And I think part of this was housing values went down. Those make up the most of people's wealth, maybe not billionaires from Orlando, but the others. Most of us rely on our home values. and the stock market took a tank. So there were a bunch of people who needed to work more years in order to catch up. This time around, it seems to be a different story, with a higher share of people leaving the workforce permanently to retire in coming out of this recession than before. I think that makes sense too. I don't know about you, but housing values are up pretty much everywhere. I'm in New Bedford. I bought in 18. Zillow tells me my home is worth a third more than I paid. Now, I'm not sure I believe them, but it's clearly worth more. That's good for my family, good for the tax base in New Bedford too. And here you can see, with the stock market up until recently doing well, with the housing market doing well, with the nature of the plague that we've been struggling with, disproportionately affecting older people, it's unsurprising that a number of our older colleagues are deciding to call it a day in ways that they might not have 10 years ago if they were the same age. I think that is a sort of, in a nutshell, the people problem. And so communities and regions that have people, particularly people with marketable and applicable skills, are really going to have an incredible advantage here. And to the mayor's point earlier, the access to transportation you have, which we are quite jealous of, I would say, south of here, and the nature of your population and your population growth, I think, position you relatively well here. The trick is connecting the dots between those opportunities and your people, and I think there are ideas that we have about that. I just want to unpack this trajectory of the sectors that have sort of saved our bacon in cycles. That blue line is hospitals or health service providers and educational institutions, not public education, but private, or private universities and colleges, for example. We have a ton of them here in Massachusetts. If you look back to that 2008, 2009 period when we had that nasty Great Recession, that blue line, employment in education and health services, didn't even change, right? We grew throughout that. Nothing really changed, but that was not the case during the COVID-related downturn. And we haven't seen that insulation, that insurance, that countercyclical protection that these sectors have provided. And those are sectors that provide very, very stable jobs and a significant number of very well-paying jobs as well. So this has been a pretty different period. I'm cautiously optimistic going forward that the main problem here is not so much creating the jobs, but filling them. The other dimension I think that's worth spending a little time on in this environment, and I'm sure you're paying attention to it too, is the inflation rate. I don't know how many of you got your gas bill this month. Woof. I mean, so what we're seeing, it was, and it's not like we keep the heat very high either. I'm sorry, I won't complain, but we're noticing, right? And so last reading nationally, year over year, the annual rate of inflation, 7.5%. So that's been quite a change. And I think a lot of it has to do with pandemic-related disruptions, particularly around the supply chain. I was talking earlier to our friend in machining about the log jam that his firm has to deal with getting imported parts and how that delays the production of local goods. And so anybody who's trying to get something is being forced to wait. And when there's more people wanting things than things we have, some of you took Economics 101, the price goes up, right? And so that's exactly what we've been experiencing. The real trick is, how long will it last? Huge fight in the economics profession and with people like me about whether this is so transitory, that is, it'll be temporary, and when these supply chain things sort themselves out, everything will be fine, and others saying, no, the chickens are coming home to roost because we've been spending too much money and the currency is going to collapse and we're going to be in Weimar Germany. And I'm not negative on this. I think it's not going to be over quickly. I think probably 2022 looks like a reasonable, this year I think we'll be dealing with this, but a lot of the price increases are just like the ones I've been experiencing with the utility bill. It's in energy, with a surge of people suddenly returning to their commute, getting back into their cars. I'm sure I'm not the only one whose car stayed in his driveway through much of late 20 and in 2021. I wasn't buying gas. Now we're all doing it. Certainly the food prices and energy prices find their way into transportation prices. And so the fact is that I don't think this will last forever. I don't think it'll be like the late 1970s for those of you who remember that period of time. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be painful for businesses that are going to pay higher prices. Those same businesses are going to have workers that are going to demand higher wages too, of course. Obviously, it's not much consolation. But I think the best information we have suggests that once some of those supply chain kinks get worked out, that we'll be in a much better place. Once we're allowed to go outside, I think we'll be in a much better place too. This is an interesting metric that Google tracks of the time spent away from home. And in Massachusetts in early February, we're still about 11% less time outside the home than we were January 20, right before the pandemic hit. And so as we look at the COVID-19 data, as the evidence seems to suggest that loosening up is appropriate, and who knows, that may change, but that's the best available information. I think the outlook for the kind of traditional activities that have been suffering disproportionately now for some time looks good, but we're not out of the woods yet. Part of the challenge with that supply chain is the uneven distribution of the vaccine around the world. I mean, we've all learned, I think, the hard way now that we have a global supply chain, that our local businesses here in Brockton and in Massachusetts rely on partnerships across the world, and when those things get disrupted, we feel that disruption here. So there are suppliers that can't do their work because they're still contending with worse pandemic conditions than we're starting to see here. We also, some of these labor supply issues are really jamming up some of our major ports of entry. So on the other side of the country, a lot of the goods that are imported from Asia land in Long Beach or in Los Angeles at very, very large port facilities. Those ships have not been able to be unloaded because we haven't had the workers to unload them at the docks or the truck drivers to get those goods out of these facilities. And so right now, I think as of last month, you had 100 ships like basically, driving around in circles waiting for their turn to be unloaded. And so a lot of this price increase that we're experiencing is, it's real, but I think it's artificially enhanced by these pandemic-related kinks in the global supply chain. That won't last forever, but I think these price challenges are likely to continue for some time, which means if you're in the market for a used car, you're probably going to pay a lot more money than you should. When we look ahead, predicting the future is a very difficult thing to do, so social scientists like me tend to rely on other experts. These are chief financial officers from across the country that are interviewed by scholars at Duke University in North Carolina, along with Federal Reserve economists in Richmond and Atlanta. When do you think the supply chain disruptions will be resolved? You can see there's opinions vary, but sometime later seems to be the consensus. Second half of 2022, 2023 or earlier, I have no idea. That's those last categories. And so I don't know whether or not to bet the farm on that, but it does suggest that this may be a while. I want to talk a little bit, too, about some promising emerging opportunities that may not self-evidently seem like Metro South opportunities, but certainly sitting in New Bedford, we are tracking them very carefully, and I've been involved with a couple of research teams that have been looking at the impacts of offshore wind. One of the reasons that my gas bill is so high is because I heat my home with gas, and that's a good thing, because we used to heat the home with the home heating oil, and that was a bad idea, and natural gas is cleaner and, in principle, less expensive. But the best alternative for Massachusetts would be one that was green and clean and price competitive with the alternatives. And offshore wind is certainly looking that way. The Commonwealth, as many of you may know, has been procuring through the utilities substantial amounts of offshore wind that will power the New England energy grid. And we're moving in that direction as we speak. So between that and the photovoltaic or solar options, we're going to have much more green, clean electricity, and that's a good thing. Those bids from the developers are coming in at very competitive prices, like at or below what we're paying already without any government subsidy, which is huge. But what's even more exciting is instead of having to import oil or import natural gas, which is difficult to do because I don't know, is anybody on a planning board who's tried to get a pipeline built through their town? This is New England. We don't do those sorts of things, right? And so we don't have access to fossil fuels even if we didn't care about climate change. Happily we do. And the state has climate targets, and so does the rest of New England. And so this is a big part of our future, and significantly, we're going to construct it, we're going to maintain it, and we have a real shot at being the center of activity for the supply chain that's going to be required in order to produce all these parts. This is not your grandfather or your grandmother's wind turbine. These things now are huge, like Prudential Center-sized wind turbines off the coast. You won't be able to see them, even if you're lucky enough to own property on Martha's Vineyard or coastal Cape Cod, because they'll be far enough away from shore. But getting those parts here from the places that manufacture them now, Europe and Asia in particular, is proving to be difficult because they're scaling up and they don't have parts to spare. We talked about the supply chain and those related problems. So we're almost at a point on the East Coast of the United States where these developers are starting to say to their suppliers, you need to open up a factory somewhere in the U.S. And so the Northeast U.S. is going to have some serious opportunities. Some of you may have seen Brayton Point in Somerset, down close to the Rhode Island border, on the site of the former coal-fired power plant, right, which we could prove took years off people's lives because of air quality and other contaminants, is being redeveloped to produce the undersea cables that will allow the energy generated offshore to get back into our homes and onto the grid. And so we are really seeing actual investment and actual economic activity and actual job creation in this field. And I think that in the long run is going to be a big opportunity, particularly for the blue-collar trades, electricians, construction, enterprises, and manufacturers of all shapes and sizes. So that doesn't do much for my gas bill this month, I'm sorry to say, and I suspect it won't do much for yours either. But there's light at the end of the tunnel, literally and figuratively. This is just beating on the same drum, more or less. We've got the fourth highest electricity rates in the country, and they spike in the winter and in the summer when we all decide to turn the heat on or to turn on the AC. So I think this is a short-term pain, long-term gains kind of a situation. Going forward, I already start with a pretty fuzzy crystal ball. Predicting the future, I like to say, is hard. But if you look at all the evidence, where we're going to be now is going to depend in important ways on whether or not the progress that we're seeing in the fight against the pandemic can be maintained. I haven't looked at the Brockton data on vaccinations and boosters. I know in my community we're at about 50-50, which is way below where we need to be. But what we can see is that across the world, and this is from the International Monetary Fund, they study counties in the United States that had higher vaccination rates, see more business activity, see more consumer spending, see reduced unemployment. And again, I think this is fairly intuitive. Those of us that are less vulnerable to illness, that are less vulnerable to these sorts of public health related disruptions are going to do much, much better. And the disparate uptake of the virus, I think, in our urban communities and our densely populated communities and in our population centers is a major economic development as well as a public health challenge. And I think that reinforces the appreciation that we should all have for our public health workers, local, private, and our healthcare providers. And I think the least that we can do is help convince our family, friends, and neighbors to roll up their sleeves and get to work. All you have to do is stick your arm out. I think that I'm a data-driven person. I've been involved at the university over the last few years in managing our pandemic response. We've got 1,100 employees and thousands of residential students, so we spend a lot of time worrying about this. All these spikes and declines that you're seeing towards the far right of these charts, that's that Omicron cycle. You can see it's getting better and better, whether the number of reported cases, the number of patients in hospitals, the number of patients in hospitals in ICUs or intensive care units, even despite some bouncing around of the testing, and the worst outcomes remain, but they are overwhelmingly concentrated in the unvaccinated and the highly vulnerable. So the outlook in this regard looks good. I don't have a crystal ball for public health either. Maybe there'll be another variant, but I think at this point, it's looking like the spring is going to be a much more relaxed and pleasant experience than the last couple of years have been. If that's the case, I think the outlook for the economy is good with these caveats about prices and labor supply. Globally, I think the outlook is for slowing growth for some of the reasons that we've described. In the advanced economies of the world, not just the US, labor supply is a big problem as this generational transition continues to play itself out. As you can see, if you're most interested in the US, last year was expected to be about a 5.6% growth rate. That's about right, but they're expecting a more moderate rate of growth coming forward. But again, recent history, 4% is pretty respectable. So I think all of this underscores the need for us to invest locally, to take care of our own, to see our people as our most valuable asset, and to redouble our efforts to commit to making our public health outreach as effective and well supported as possible. As the mayor said, I think we're at an unprecedented time in terms of the available resources that have been transferred from the federal government into the state government, the local government, the county government. I don't know if you remember, we have one of those too, and the school districts. So many of our local area public administrators have a lot of investments that they are poised to make. I think, my advice would be to make wise choices, but I think there's a lot of things that you've been waiting to do, and the time has come to do them. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions if time permits. Thank you.
All right, great presentation, Dr. Goodman, and thanks again, Mayor, for your presentation as well. Yeah, okay. Is that one working?
Yeah, I think so. Wait.
I was told I had to pass the microphone, so if it's not.
Yeah, so, okay, maybe then you do.
Okay. All right, well, two great presentations, and I hope you were all inspired by the growth and the data that we hope is coming in the next couple of years in Brockton and the region. So we are ready.
I think it works now.
Everybody awake now?
So we're running short on time, so we're just going to ask one question of each of you. Dr. Goodman, how do you think early college and dual enrollment programs impact the costs and benefits of college?
Oh, so that's what I would call a softball. So, because one of the strategic initiatives I've been tasked with focusing on is extending access to higher ed through early college. I think it's a game changer. I mean, here in Brockton, you've seen it with your New Heights Charter. We've been working closely with our, through the Connect partnership, which includes all of the public higher ed institutions in southeastern Massachusetts. So including Massasoit and Bridgewater State and Bristol Community College, on developing early college partnerships with our gateway cities. The UMass system is launching a pilot in this area called the Commonwealth Collegiate Academy shortly. We have letters of intent that have been signed to participate with New Bedford and Fall River, one coming soon from Brockton, and I was working with the mayor over lunch about getting one from Brockton as well. This would allow free access to college courses on a remote synchronous basis, because getting your students to our campus, it's about 40 minutes, I can confirm, I just did it. And so using the technology that we've become much more experienced both at K-12 and higher ed level, I think it is a real game changer. You talk about the cost and benefits. I think we've seen it here in Brockton through your charter school, that students who can acquire a significant number of college credits along the way are more likely to go to college and more likely to finish. And despite our best efforts, the level of state support for public higher ed still requires a lot of fees and tuition. And so the more of those credits your students can get while they're in high school, the fewer credits they'll have to pay for. And so I think this is a sorts of financial aid opportunity as well, and a way to supplement the available opportunities. And I think in ways that could make our urban public schools more attractive and competitive than they've been able to be. I don't know how it works out this way, but I know on the South Coast, the vocational schools are often the first schools of choice for parents of students who aspire to college rather than to a skills trade, and that's because they're perceived to be superior academic options, which isn't always true, but nevertheless a perception. I think these kinds of enrichment opportunities will help to even the playing field, and definitely are the intention, I think, of the Commonwealth, and certainly of UMass, is to expand access to high-quality, affordable higher ed.
Great, thanks. And Mayor, can you talk about the city's unfunded pension liability and what's been happening with that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Whoever asked that, thank you. So, listen, was it you, Clarkson? Huh? No, so the unfunded pension liability, now is the great time. A lot of you that are bankers here understand about refinancing. The interest rates were so low. So what I asked the CFO, Mr. Clarkson, is I wanted to test the market. We needed to go out to the market to, in essence, refinance our pension liability. It was $300 million. So Troy and his team worked diligently on that. And he and I, this is a great story, he and I spent about 12 hours in Boston, the financial district, 125 High Street. Stiefel was our agent. And literally, we were in this boardroom getting grilled for hours on end by potential investors. And why I share this story for twofold. Number one, the last woman that came in was from Eaton Vance. And she grilled us. Didn't she, Troy? But she went at it. And, you know, I answered questions truthfully, as the lawyer always tells me to do, because I'm a lawyer, and the MBA says, yeah, business. But, you know, she asked great questions because they're potentially investing in Brockton, right? And so I said to her finally, ma'am, do you have any other questions? And she said, I do. How long did it take you to get into High Street today? I said, the expressway was a bear. It took Troy and I about an hour and 40 minutes. How about yourself? She said, an hour and 30. I said, where do you live? Now this woman is number 2 in Eaton Vance. She could be in Dover, Sherborne, Cohasset, Jerusalem Road. She could be anywhere. Guess what her answer was to me? I live on East Ashland Street in Brockton, Massachusetts. Imagine that, honest to God. And her name is Liz Santiago, Simone Santiago, and I want to thank her because that made my day. But I also want to thank the investment, Wall Street, because we went out, we were supposed to go on 2 days to do the $300 million. We had $1.3 billion with a B invested in day one. We had to shut it off and we sold it out. So it was a game changer. It really was a game changer.
Great, thanks, Mayor. And I apologize.
The great story. You didn't tell a great story.
Oh, I got to tell my Gracie story, my daughter Grace. I have to do this. I have to stand up on this one because this is a good one. And I'm sorry for BCA. And thank you, Mike, for being here. So my daughter Grace, God love her, she always tries to give me information. And I told us at the graduation at New Heights Charter, and Doctor, you're right, 55% of those kids that graduated had an associate's from Massasoit. And then Southeastern Regional, 66% of the kids are living in the city of Brockton for Voc Tech, which is awesome. And I want to thank the chairman, Tony Branch, who is the Brockton representative, for being here. So my quick daughter story, she always tries to enlighten me with information, right? She's a 7th grader. And she said to me one morning, she said, Dad, what do you think about the kangaroo? I said, the kangaroo, Grace? I don't know, I'm a Brockton boxer. Tell me about the kangaroo. She said, you have to be the kangaroo, Dad. You have to be the kangaroo in life. You're the mayor, but you have to be the kangaroo. I said, Gracie, honey, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, kangaroos can only jump ahead. Physically, they are unable to jump behind. So, I'm asking you right now, always be the kangaroo in business. Always forge ahead. Always jump ahead. Be the kangaroo. Thank you.
That was great, thank you. You're on a roll today.
I'm totally stealing that.
Yeah, there you go. So both of you did such a great job that you get to add to your chamber pen collection with 2 pens each today. So we're moving up in the world. So thank you very much, Dr. Michael Goodman and Mayor Bob Sullivan. Great presentations today. And
Thank you, sir.
I will thank you. And I will take just a couple minutes for some chamber updates. The chamber's next event is the 7th annual Multicultural Business SBA Community Navigator Expo right here at Thorny Lee Golf Club from 5 to 7:30 p.m. on March 3rd. This program is being sponsored in part by Northeastern Savings Bank and features the new SBA New England administrator and a diverse panel of 4 small business owners. Some save the dates: Government Affairs Luncheon with a special speaker, April 29th. Annual Small Business and Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. Nominations are open, and that will be May 20th. The Athena Leadership Award Luncheon, nominations are also open for that, and that will be June 17th. So the door prizes, each Good Morning Metro South or Good Day Metro South, we randomly select one company to be highlighted in the upcoming action report. And that is Fusion Dolls, and the winner is Lisa Real Sliney of Rockland Trust. Oh, I messed all of that up, didn't I? I think I read the wrong thing. So Lisa is the winner of a Fusion Dolls doll. Got it, okay. The member profile is Miles Jackson, DJ Old School. We have a bottle of wine, which is Sue Murray from Seed Corporation. $25 American Express gift card. Lindsay Siegel Croker from Family and Community Resources. So congratulations to all of you, and you can collect your prizes at the registration table. So thank you today to today's ambassador team, to Rich Morgan Photography, Brockton Community Access Channel, the Enterprise News, Chamber staff members, our host at Thorny Lee Golf Club, our sponsor, Old Colony Elderly Services, and finally, thanks again to our speakers, Armindo Rocha from OCES, Michael Goodman, UMass Dartmouth, and City of Brockton Mayor Bob Sullivan for being with us here today. Thank you all for joining.